What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy, that's Joe, and this is a modified race day rundown.
Yeah, Atlanta's modified. We've got all new racing that's happening this week at that track. It's going to be exciting. Plus, F1 is now in the DraftKings lobby. So if you want to get in on this week's action, drop your DraftKings tag below. We'll get you invited to our weekly league. We've got some paid contests there, but mainly the free contest is where we have fun. We've got a free F1 contest there this week. So drop that tag below and we'll get you invited.
Yeah, I'm super excited for both of the races that we're going to talk about. Not going to lie, this kind of sprung up. We kind of heard some rumors about F1 joining the DraftKings, contest, and then it just happened earlier this week. So we're going to dabble with it just a little bit and just kind of see what happens. But we're obviously here to talk about NASCAR. That's what we do. And I don't know how you're feeling about this race, but I am super excited to watch it and super nervous to play it because we've seen very little action. Qualifying got canceled because practice got canceled because of weather. So I don't really know how much we can take from those. There's obviously no data that we can really use for this track because, like you said, it's brand new. They resurfaced it, higher banking. They're running the super speedway package on this track, so it's like Daytona and Talladega, but on a 1.5-mile track. Dude, there is so much to be excited for this weekend. Where do you want to start with this?
Yeah, there is so many unknowns at Atlanta this week. It's like Talladega with Daytona and everything mixed in. Is it super speedway? Are we going to get more traditional racing? There's so many unknowns. I don't think anybody knows really what to expect. Ryan Preece has done some testing in this next-gen car. He doesn't even know what to expect. There's a lot of stuff that's really going to be really left to figure out, and I don't know how many people are going to want to pick apart what that looks like. And I know with F1 coming into the mix this week, their season starting, we've talked about it. Hey, what's going to happen if DraftKings ever comes around and introduces it into the lobby? And here we are. It's in the lobby. It might be a good week to kind of unpack that can of worms, since this week where there are so many unknowns with Atlanta.
Yeah, I'm going to be, I think my approach this week is enjoy the races and I'm going to probably end up playing a little bit light. I'm just going to enjoy this mostly as a fan, I think, for both. F1, just to try to figure out the game because it is not the same as NASCAR scoring. We'll get into that a little later in the show because I think that's going to involve possibly more strategy than even NASCAR lineups call for, and they call for a good bit. This week, I mean, here's the deal, guys. There's no data. This is like a brand new track. There's no data to go off of. So I think what we need to do is we need to start to try to identify some of the teams and some of these drivers who are starting to stand out a little bit this season or maybe lacking a little bit. So we're going to be doing things a little different in this episode. We're not going to be doing this kind of standard driver rundown. We have all of the DK Impact scores in our race guide, which you can check down, link down below. Let's start with some of these teams because I think we'll get into, I think, strategy, how to play, but let's get into some of these drivers first. You were wanting to start with last week's winner, and I think that's a great place to start because this guy was not good last year. He had maybe 2 good races. I think everyone kind of remembers him and Denny Hamlin's run-in at Indianapolis road course. Almost had a win there. Dumped Hamlin, cut across the course. It was quite the ending. But he outperformed my expectations of what he was capable of doing this early in the year. He's been kind of running well. But we kind of had him as somewhat of a caution play last week because he was starting so high. We were hoping to get a little more PD out of him. We didn't expect him to lead over 100 laps. This guy has been on fire. Of course, we're talking about Chase Briscoe, and we're talking about Stewart-Haas Racing. And they may be the most impressive team, in my opinion, starting out based on how they finished last year with that car. Where do you want to start with Briscoe?
Man, I think last week was awesome to see. We all anticipated Briscoe having a coming out party at some point. Did we expect it this soon? I don't know if we did, really. I think Stuart Haas as a whole last year, as you alluded to, was really a disappointment. I thought there was a lot more that we could expect, especially after Harvick had won 9 races the year before. There was a lot to missing in what we had anticipated for them. And Briscoe coming in with a dominant performance from Xfinity the year before, he didn't look like he really belonged in the Cup Series at points last year. And we were looking for him to take strides this year, and this year he has really shown that and leading a lot of laps and being up towards the front often. And I really like what we're seeing from him. And even Harvick, this, like you said, Stuart Haas this year has kind of put their foot forward and said, all right, this year the parity that we've talked about over the last season or two that this next gen car is supposed to bring, we're seeing it, I think, with Stuart Haas, with Almirola really stepping in as well, being a top 10 contender every week. His average finish is 7th. That dude's been performing. This is his final year. Man, there's a lot that's going right for this team. Even Cole Custer, last year, he was really fading, averaging probably towards the back end of the 20s in the finishing position. This year, he's towards the front. He's 20th as average finishing position. So even he's seeing gains. I think there's a lot to look forward to this year with Stuart Haas.
There's definitely been a lot better performance from Stuart Haas as a whole, and in particular, Harvick, Almirola, Briscoe, like you mentioned. A new metric that we're kind of watching this year and seeing if it really helps us throughout the year. I think this is going to be a metric that once we get some more data and we can start using this to identify, okay, what is the guy really doing on mile and a halves? What's he really doing on road courses? I think that's where it's going to really excel. But I think it'll also help as we get closer to the playoffs, and that's points per lap. So let me back up. Place differential in DraftKings is a very big component of a driver's score. If you're up front and you do really well, you lead a lot of laps, you get a lot of fastest laps, but you wreck and then you finish 35th. On paper, it's going to look like you had a so-so day. You got to dig a little bit deeper. Well, that's what this is intended to do. What are you doing? What's the points that you're getting me, not necessarily the points that you're losing me, because this is NASCAR. And just like a couple weeks ago when we saw with Blaney, he was at Vegas, had one of the best cars, and then Brad, lost control and took him out. Obviously not intentional. I'm going to say it's intentional because I had a lot of Blaney that day, but that's one of those things where it's like, yeah, if you just kind of look at the final box score, Blaney didn't have a very good day, but actually he's been one of the better drivers. I bring that up to say both Briscoe and Almirola in that metrics, which is counting your fastest laps points, laps led points, and your finishing position points, and dividing that by the laps that you actually complete, not what the laps are in the race, but what you completed, because sometimes you're going to have bad races. Let's try to eliminate those and see what you're really doing for me. They got 2 drivers in the top 10 after 4 races. That's pretty good. Obviously, Briscoe gets a big boost from last week because he led so many laps and had a lot of fastest laps. But even Harvick, who's gotten a good chunk of his points from place differential, he's also still getting you some fastest laps too, and good finishing position. So Stuart Haas, I think, has been one of the best teams this year. Somewhat sneaky because obviously you got Hendrick up there doing some great things. They've already got 2 wins this year. Penske's looked really strong, but I think really the story is just the turnaround from the last year to this year. So I think Stuart Haas is looking really good early in this season.
Yeah, you mentioned Hendrick and how they do have 2 wins early, and it's one of those situations where who is number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 in this Hendrick stable? Because these guys are kind of all over the place if you look at it. It's fun to look at from an angle where we're pulling data and trying to figure out, all right, every week where's the value. It's hard to pinpoint it with this crew.
Yeah, I kind of laugh a little bit because I wouldn't call this person out even if I could remember who it was, but there was someone on one of the bigger NASCAR sort of production shows. They were talking about Hendrick, and this was before the Phoenix race, I believe. But he ranked Chase Elliott as fourth in the Hendrick stable. I don't necessarily know how he's coming up with that because as we look so far this year, yeah, he has not gotten the finishes that we would like to see, but he still has the best average finish amongst his teammates. Obviously, Larson has the engine trouble last week, so that's going to screw up his average finish. But he's got the best average finish, and when you look at his points per lap, he ranks sixth overall ahead of Kyle Larson, who does have a win. Elliott has been strong. He's just had a few things not go his way. Bowman's already got the win, so they kind of get to have their own strategy the rest of the year as far as attacking a race from a playoff standpoint because they're already locked in. But they're doing okay, and William Byron is just his numbers are currently suffering from the two races to start the year where he just got taken out. I mean, no real fault of his own. I mean, he really has looked pretty strong and had a pretty good run last week, if I remember correctly as well. But yeah, I mean, to me, I think you still got to say Larson's probably the number one. He has looked really fast. I've got to put Elliott 2 for ranking them. And, I mean, you got to count the win. I got to put Bowman 3 and Byron 4.
Yeah, it's weird that we're looking at this way, that these guys are right there kind of in line where it's hard to pick 1, 2, 3, 4 with them, but at the same time, putting together the data the way we have, it really allows you to dissect it from how are these guys performing week to week and where's the value, like we're alluding to. And it seems like Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott seem to be the most consistent bang for your buck and are are drivers that you can look to weekly.
And just briefly, just something I kind of noticed, they're the only team as far as the big teams, Hendrick, Stewart-Haas, Joe Gibbs, Penske, with all of their drivers in the top 15 with this metric of points per lap. So I think that's something to consider there too. They have been very strong to start this year.
So getting on to another team, I think one of the teams that's kind of been a letdown outside of Kyle Busch is the Gibbs team. Like,
I'd say Toyota, honestly, overall.
Toyota as a whole, I think, has been a little bit of a letdown, but the Gibbs team as a whole, Joe Gibbs Racing looks to be struggling a little bit, if you will, because Denny Hamlin hasn't had the performances. Christopher Bell has just been downright awful, and I don't know why. I thought this car might fit his driving style a little bit more. It's more, we've seen some guys that have had success with some dirt racing history early this season, and he's not really been in contention. So I don't know if it's something as a team that's the issue, or they've just had bad luck.
Yeah, and you mentioned Christopher Bell, and that includes a pole. He got the pole at Vegas, I believe, right? Yeah. I don't know what's going on with that team, but I think it is somewhat of a Toyota issue overall because, I mean, Kurt Busch has been okay. Kyle Busch has been okay. So there is something there.
The Busch brothers.
The Busch brothers, they have been okay. We've seen, outside of Daytona, Bubba Wallace has just kind of struggled overall. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's kind of one of those, is it just these particular teams or is it Toyota as a whole? I think it is somewhat Toyota as a whole, and just the Busch brothers they're really good, and especially with these cars that are harder to hang on. I think we're starting to see their talent, like why they've been so good, why they've won so many races. Like I think they've won, it's got to be like 93 combined Cup Series races between them, somewhere around in there. It's over 90. That's impressive. That's really, really impressive from two drivers right there. Hamlin's stats are a little skewed because he had that one miscue where he shifted incorrectly and destroyed the transaxle. So he was running good that day, but
the transmission,
it's transaxle. Oh. Yeah, it's in the rear. It's not a transmission anymore. But yeah, he tried to shift it like the classic H pattern. And these are sequential shifters, so it's just pull back every time you want to shift up and go forward when you want to or shift down. Yeah. Anyway, I was thinking about this. Just a quick side note. I was thinking, we got Coda coming up next week, which we're going to be there. Super, super excited for that race. First road course with this new car. We know it's going to be fun. I do expect one of these really good drivers at road courses like a Truex, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, one of them to potentially make that same shifting mistake that Hamlin made. We'll see if it does play out, but I will not be surprised if one or even a couple guys do it just because old habits die hard. We got plenty of time to kind of talk about Coda later. I think Joe Gibbs overall, like you said, is just kind of it's just been a letdown. I think they'll get it together, possibly even this week. I think the cars are going to end up being a little bit more even on the track at Atlanta because it is somewhat of a super speedway race. So, I think you get away with a little bit more at these kind of tracks because drafting is so important. So I don't know, man. I think outside of Busch, like you've already said, Gibbs is definitely struggling, but I do think they'll get it together at some point. I just don't know exactly when that's going to be. It might still be a few races.
And what I think you're right with that. It's going to be fun to kind of watch Denny Hamlin, I think, the most and see how he's able to figure out the setup and see how he progresses because he was one of the most consistent drivers all of last year, challenging Kyle Larson for the championship without getting the wins. He was there with points, so we know he knows how to points race. So if he can clean up the act and get things together, look for him to really be one of those key metrics that we're watching throughout the season for some consistency. Speaking of consistency, I think outside of an issue involving Brad Keselowski, who was a former Penske driver, Ryan Blaney has been probably one of the more consistent drivers overall. He's been somebody that I've liked throughout and was one of my Final Four drivers to make the playoffs when we talked about it leading into the season. And right now he's first in the metric that you talked about earlier, the PPL. He's got a lot lining up for him. And then this being a kind of super speedway race potentially, Joey Logano, his teammate, is one of the best at that.
Yeah, he's doing really well. He's 9th in points per lap. But the other thing is he's got a 94.7 driver rating, which is on the higher side compared to some of these other guys. It's higher than every Joe Gibbs driver by quite a bit. It's higher than everyone except for Kyle Larson. And it's higher than everyone from Stewart-Haas so far. So Logano is not quite getting the finishes that we would expect from him, or maybe what his driving capabilities are. He's not quite getting the finishes he needs to, but he's still doing really well. He's still getting us some performance. He's still getting us decent finish. Average finish of 12th through 4 races is better than Ryan Blaney. Not completely Blaney's fault, of course. We've already went over that. And then you look over at Cindric, and he's already got a win. Overall, his performance is certainly behind those, Blaney and Logano, but that would be to be expected because he's a rookie. But with that win in his back pocket, he's got a much more comfortable regular season the rest of the year. But the Fords of Blaney and Logano, those two teams, they have been really, really strong. And I think they're definitely guys to consider this week at Atlanta. Whether you're doing DraftKings or Prize Picks or just taking them straight up, I think both these guys have legitimate shots to pull this one out.
Yeah, and don't sleep on Austin Cindric. Where he's at, where he's priced as a driver, he's got the talent to take this and make a great day out of it. For a rookie, he's somebody I can feel confident in where he's at this week and put him in any sort of lineup. Two guys I think that have surprised a lot of us this year, but from a talent standpoint are right up there with anybody, Tyler Reddick and Ross Chastain. These two dudes know how to drive a race car. If they can keep it clean and keep it in one piece, they're showing that they're going to be in contention, I think, every week with this new next-gen car. I think it's really fits their driving styles like we talked about in some of our previous episodes. Who's going to really take advantage of this new composite body? Who's going to take advantage of all of this new style of racing and apply their backgrounds. And I think Tyler Reddick and Ross Chastain have done a great job there.
I think we're literally saying at this point, it's not if one of these guys win, it's just when are they going to win, because it's going to happen. I mean, they were both in contention last week. Briscoe just had a slightly bit better setup, I guess, and he just made it stick late. But, man, Chastain was there and Reddick was right there just in case either of them had issues. Really, really strong in multiple races this year. Both of them are ranked inside the top 5 when we look at points per lap. They've both had their moments where they've dominated a race, just been out front leading laps, just clicking off fastest laps. It'll be interesting to see what they do here at Atlanta. I don't know if I would say this sort of driving condition suits either one of them. I wouldn't say it's their strong suit. But what the heck do we know through 4 races? Because I don't think either of us really thought they'd be this much better than some of the guys we've already talked about with some of these bigger teams. Like they're putting it to everybody, and even their teammates, Daniel Suarez, Chastain's teammate, and Austin Dillon, Reddick's teammate, both of them have had good runs this year too. I mean, Dillon would have had a much better finish last week if it wasn't for Daniel Suarez, who was trying to block Kyle Busch. I think it was on the last lap and basically took him from the top 10 to like 20th or something like that. So tough break for all you Austin Dillon fans and users on DraftKings of him, because that kind of stung. But I mean, really all 4 of these guys, the 2 guys from RCR, the 2 guys from Trackhouse, they have been, I'm not as surprised by RCR, to be honest, just because they were pretty good last year. So it's and they also were one of the teams to really develop this car. So it's not that surprising. But I got to say, Trackhouse, really, really impressive. They have doing some really nice stuff over there. It's going to be fun to watch them for the next few years just to see what they're able to build over there with Pitbull and whatnot, because they got it going on right now, man.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Austin Dillon this week could be a sleeper, because he's got a lot of super speedway success, and that he's had some success at similar style tracks, Texas being one, being that he's really good at weird kind of races and environments where it takes a little bit of a nudging to get a win. I think you can look at him in a lot of different scenarios this week. Doing a little bit of a deeper dive, you want to kind of get into a race preview for Atlanta, because I think strategy is going to be kind of key this week, because it is a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just about to say we normally talk about the race preview first, and we just kind of overlooked it this week, I think. But now's as good a time as any, because this is Atlanta, but it is completely new. But we do still have 500 miles of racing here. That is 325 laps, mile-and-a-half track. Kind of mentioned that already. 227.5 potential performance points. I think it will be far shy of that, because I do expect there to be quite a few cautions, so not as many fast laps available, but that is how many is up for grabs. First and second stage are both 105 laps. It's a long run. Would imagine there will probably be a competition caution. We haven't heard anything official, but more than likely there will be. And then the last stage, 115 laps. Not that it matters that much, but the last time we were here under the old track configuration, Kurt Busch won. But he might be able to do it again too, because we talked about it, super speedway style racing on mile-and-a-half. I guess the closest thing that we have to this would be the All-Star race at Texas. Now, I was at the race. I haven't watched it back on playback, so I don't know how it was for everyone I'm watching on TV, but from what I remember, it was a fun race. We didn't really see the leaders get out too far. I know Larson was really good in the All-Star race, but Brad was able to make some moves late, just not quite good enough. That was the old body style. This car definitely races a lot more loose than those high downforce cars. But I think we see something similar. We see more pack racing. And I think my biggest concern here, I don't know if you feel any differently, but these guys are going to try to stick these cars 3 wide, and someone will at some point have a loose moment and take out half the field.
It could go that way. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know 100% what to expect. I don't think anybody does, like we talked about earlier. But I do know one thing: we have given impact scores for every driver. So if you want to take a look at that, go down below and check the race guide out. We have all the impact scores along with our driver pool and some core lineup builds. So definitely check it out if you're looking for more scores related to this race. But I think Brad Keselowski is probably one of the best plays that you can have this week because he knows how to get around a super speedway. He knows how to race at mile and a halves. He's just kind of in this right mix, and we've seen them already be successful in this package because this package this week is what they're running on super speedways. So last year we had the 750 horsepower package and the 550. This year we have one package everywhere except for on the super speedways and here. So
yeah,
we've already seen Keselowski and his teammate Buescher be really fast and successful at Daytona. I like him a lot, and whether he's priced at DraftKings and with his upside, with the points being set by the metric, why not play him?
Right. Yeah, we're not planning on doing obviously the full rundown like we would normally do, but I will go ahead and spoil it just a little bit. Brad is the first driver, at least that I am aware of, that we have both given 10s as far as DK impact. That does not mean anything because he will honestly probably be the guy who causes the big wreck, but he might still be clean from that. You know, he might be able to nudge someone else out of the way and take out the field and ride off and get a top 5. But yeah, you're right. The price tag, the starting position, and then just the skill set, both at mile and a halves and super speedways. Brad is probably my favorite play on the slate, and he's probably going to be one of the higher owned drivers, I would think. But there are some really good guys. I think my approach this week will be a little bit different. First of all, I'm not planning on going as heavy because I just want to enjoy the race, and I have no idea what to expect. But I think it's going to be somewhat of a stack-to-back approach. Definitely going with guys like Larson and Hamlin who have that PD upside with less of a downside if they wreck out. I think those are the places to go. But with so many laps and potential performance points, the biggest question is, will we have, like super speedway racing, will we have multiple lead changes throughout the race? If there is, I already feel like the fastest laps will be spread out throughout the field because drafting is so big. So that's going to be divvied up throughout the field. But if we have just one guy like a Blaney, Logano, a Kyle Busch, or whatever, if they just run off and leave it, then obviously you gotta have them. But man, I just don't know if we're going to see that. I think we're going to see constant lead changes. You feeling similar? Are you feeling different about that?
I think we could. So I want to take it easy this week because there are so many unknowns. But if I'm building lineups, I'm going to take a shot at a couple different builds. Stack the back is one, and then take a shot at a Blaney or someone like that kind of dominating this race. So there's a couple ways that you can approach it this week with there being so many unknowns with the new car. Like we've talked about, I don't know how much I want to put my budget towards that. I think there's lots of other ways to do it. And like you said, it's going to be a fun race to watch, I think. So I want to kind of have some action on it. I just want to be selective in the way I do it.
Yeah, at the time of this recording, we do not have the Prize Picks numbers, but as soon as they come out, we put those in our Garage Thoughts, and it'll be fun to see if those change between release time and then obviously race time, because sometimes you can take some advantage there. But I'm looking to try to take advantage of unders this week on Prize Picks. I just feel like that's the safest way to approach it because, like I said, this might be a stack-to-back kind of a race. We'll see how they score it. If they score it like a more mile-and-a-half style race, then we might get a guy like, Kyle Larson at like 70 points or something like that. Well, that might be kind of a nice to take under there. But then also, we're getting some pretty good odds at multiple places, too, for just straight-up winners here. And I think this is a race that anyone is capable of winning. Chastain, Corey LaJoie literally has a chance. He looked good in practice. Like, he was putting up fast times, and he knows how to draft. So he might be a good guy if you can get maybe a top 10 or top 5. That might be a way to approach it this week because I feel like DraftKings is just such a crapshoot this week. But I'm not trying to crap on this race because I think it's going to be a phenomenal race.
Yeah, we're trying to make sure we get the best out of our bankroll. And this week, I don't know if DraftKings is there, but if you do want to get DraftKings and have a little bit of fun, F1, like we said, is in the lobby, and this is the opening week of the F1 season. And we've talked about this for years. What happens if F1 gets dropped in the DraftKings lobby? Do we bring that under the DK Garage umbrella? We want to know from you. Do you want us to do more F1 content? We're about to dive into it for the first time, Jeremy. I'm kind of excited. Obviously, we haven't had a lot of time to prepare for this. We have done quite a bit of stuff this week to get prepared. We're learning the scoring system and everything along those lines, and we can kind of dive into that to get these folks kind of ready to go here.
Yeah, if you're obviously watching in America, the race is going to be starting, I believe it's 11 Eastern. So kind of plan your day according. What's cool about F1, obviously racing mostly on the other side of the world, is we get to see F1 racing, and then we get to have a very minimal delay until NASCAR. And I got way more into F1 last year than I had in years past. It was a heck of a battle all year between Verstappen and the 7-time champ Lewis Hamilton. I think we may see some of that early on, or not early on, but some of that throughout this year, but maybe not early on because Mercedes looks to be lacking a little bit. Kind of talk about that some. But this is going to be a very different strategy as far as lineups building goes compared to NASCAR. It is, if you've played any other games like NFL or NBA or just some of these other ones where you do showdowns, so you have like a captain and then you pick 4, 5, 6 whatever remaining players to fill out your lineup. That's kind of how this is, but then you also have a extra element where they're giving you a constructor position, and that's where you're getting a team. So Team Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, those kind of things. That's another element that really adds just a whole new dynamic to playing this. I have really no idea how these things are going to play out, but I'm certainly excited to try this week. It is the opening race here for the F1 season, and guess what? They're just like NASCAR. They are getting an entirely new car as well. I think everything on it is pretty much new except for the powertrain component, which is also the same as NASCAR. So they're trying to improve racing. They're trying to get to where there's more close, maybe not side by side, but very close racing. So they've changed the aero and everything. But we are at Bahrain. I can't believe we are talking about this. This is just a crazy thing because we just didn't know if this was ever happen, but here it is, a reality. And this, I don't know much about this track other than so far what I've seen in practice and qualifying. It looks like a fun track.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to just get to dabble in this. Like you said, the scoring structure is really unique. It's going to be fun to kind of learn with the way, or learn this week to week as we get more exposure and how these new cars will play, because we saw Ferrari really fast in practice and Mercedes struggle a little bit. And Mercedes has George Russell now in the mix, and he's an ex-Williams driver, so he's starting ninth. And is that going to play into how place differential is now a key metric in the scoring system over here for the F1 series? This is going to be fun to learn how all of this plays into it, because I think one thing that is a little bit different from NASCAR is the guys that usually are starting in the back in F1 tend to stay in the back. So this is going to be challenging to find those guys that are finishing in the top 10 where the prize or the points really stack up.
Yeah, so let's kind of break down the scoring. So unlike NASCAR, where everyone gets some sort of finishing position point, both in actual cup scoring and DraftKings, F1, they don't do that. Only the top 10 will receive an actual point of some sort. If you finish 11th or 20th, doesn't matter, 0 points. Well, DraftKings has adopted that. First place gets 25 points and a pretty big drop-off between first and second at 18. Third gets 15 points, and so on and so forth, where 10th will get 1 point. The fastest lap of the entire race is big in F1, so we know guys will be going for that too, because that's an extra point that one driver, one team gets. So that is something big for both the driver and the constructor, or the teams, however you wish to view that. We've seen it before where, like, let's say Lewis Hamilton was kind of dominating the race, was going to win, but Verstappen had the fastest lap. We've seen we're on the last lap, or second to last lap or whatever. Lewis's teammate at this time was Bottas, would come in, get some fresh tires, and they would just run out the fastest lap, and they would take that point away from Red Bull. So it wasn't necessarily about getting it from Bottas, it was taking it away from Verstappen, and even vice versa. We saw it with Perez and et cetera. So that's going to be big, and when a driver does get that, that is 3 points. So it is something to consider, because I think points are going to be very, very tight throughout. They do have laps led, just like NASCAR, except for this one is only worth 0.1 points. So you lead 10 laps, you get 1 point. There's only, 57, 58 laps, so there's not a ton of points, but those few extra laps led could make a huge, huge difference. And then, so you kind of have a strategy to play here. If you want to, let's use Red Bull as an example. Let's say you like Verstappen and you also like Perez. You can play both of them in a lineup, but you cannot play Team Red Bull as your constructor. But you could play Verstappen and Red Bull and not play Perez. Yes. So if you do something like that, you're hoping in that case, Verstappen beats Perez, because that's worth 5 points if you defeat a teammate. So that is really, really big.
And let's not forget the captain, if you will, gets 1.5 times the points. He's 1.5 times the cost, but it really does add up whenever you're looking at the performance points that they're able to acquire. And then podium finishes are big. Podium finishes are massive in F1. So that's first, second, or third. And that helps you as the constructor as well, because teamsmanship in this series is huge. Like you talked about, there's a lot of strategy that plays into it, and so if you can get both of or two of the teammates on the podium together, you can get 3 additional points with that construct. It's going to be fun how you can really shape these lineups, because being that it's a captain mode, you really do have options available to you. If you think one of the drivers might not be able to stack up the points like a Verstappen that costs a lot of money, or a Hamilton, but at the same time, if we look at this kind of in a situation that we would on a Sunday competition in the NFL, do you fade a Josh Allen? Do you fade a Patrick Mahomes whenever they've got a good matchup? How do you approach this? There's multiple ways.
Right, yeah. So you have the option, do you pay for that expensive guy, or do you actually go really cheap and try to hope that it really boosts him so you can get some of these other good guys, and then overall it kind of balances out? Because, if you get a guy like Daniel Ricciardo, who's had a kind of a rough practice, but let's just say, and I don't think I'm going to end up here, but let's just use him as an example. He's starting 18th. Well, let's just say that car is way faster than that. They just had the wrong setup, and he ends up nailing it. Or they have some crazy pit strategy that just pays off. Let's say he gets an 8th place finish. That's only 4 points, but that's going to be up 10 spots. Well, that's an extra 5 points right there that no other driver might get, because they may not move up that much. You might see more drivers move down, or whatever. But you get him at a cheaper spot in the captain, well, then that's 1.5 times the amount, and then now you can get some guys like Verstappen and maybe Charles Leclerc or something like that in there. So this strategy is going to be crazy to see and fun to see how people choose to approach the captain spot. Do you pay for that expensive guy? Does it pay off, or is it the cheaper guy? It's going to be a heck of a lot of fun to try to figure this game out.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to play along every week. And like we said, if you want to see more F1 content from us, we can focus a little bit more of our time that way. We'll definitely be focused on our NASCAR content. That's the primary reason we're here. But we can do more. It's about what you want to see for sure.
Yeah. So where would you like to kind of take this? Because we don't have, like I said, a ton of information because this was kind of sprung up on us a little bit late. We were kind of focused on Atlanta, and then we get this kind of midweek. So we're like, let's throw something together. We obviously saw the Ferraris look fast. They're starting first and third, but then you got Red Bull starting second with Verstappen and Perez in fourth. Did you see anything in practice that you like? Are you kind of thinking maybe Mercedes figures it out in the race? Because both of those guys obviously have some PD upside. And then, Lewis Hamilton won this race last year, although it was slightly a different car.
Oh, it's going to be fun. I definitely liked what I saw in Ferrari with Leclerc and Sainz. Signs.
Yeah.
It's going to be.
That's going to be a fun aspect if we do more of this too, with some of these guys' names.
We've watched. It's just the pronunciations. It's a little bit different than what we get over here, but I'm excited to get to adapt to it. And I really liked what I saw with Ferrari early. This new car and everything that they were able to hone in on to get that quick qualifying pace. I like them in the constructor spot as a team this week, and you stack that with Verstappen, I think you get a little bit of a discount that you can do some solid lineup builds with.
Yeah, I think, oh man, it's going to be interesting to see if we get a lot of incidents in that race where we can see some more shakeups, or if some of these guys played a little safer with this new car, like we've seen some at some points with NASCAR in their new car. Some guys obviously taking the safer approach, but it seems like that first corner, if it holds true to like most F1 races do, if you get that first corner clean off first and you make no mistakes, you're going to win the race. So this race could be decided literally by the turn one between Leclerc and Verstappen. I think the Ferraris have a little bit better performance, but I think Verstappen's obviously I would say he's a little bit better driver than Leclerc. Will he just send it and try to make it stick and do something crazy? Because he definitely will do that. We've seen it in the past. I'm so excited for the start of this race because it's going to be really wild. But a guy that really kind of surprised me was Bottas, Lewis Hamilton's old teammate. He's with, I believe it's Alfa Romeo. I don't have it in front of me, but I think he's with Alfa Romero. Another fun thing, we get to learn all these things, starting sixth. I think it was the first practice, didn't even get any time because he kept having misfires. Just practice overall for that team was not very good, and then he lays down sixth fastest lap. And he's pretty cheap, too, with DraftKings. I'm kind of excited to see what they may be able to do because they weren't that great of a team last year. But he is a very, very good driver. So if he can do something with that team, that might bring some of the competition a little closer to some of these top-tier teams. There's a lot of fun, I think, to kind of look forward to with that team throughout the year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a younger driver that is part of the Haas F1 team. That is Mick Schumacher. So you might know that name. His family is a traditional racing family over there. And this is going to be fun to kind of see him in this ride, see if he's able to get a decent finish. Like we said, they have kind of a two-tiered teams, A and B series almost racing together. And the way that you see the times and everything, these guys aren't really going to move up a lot, but if they can move up a lot in their place differential, he's starting 12th. He's got a position or ability to finish in the top 10 if he really has a strong run. It'd be exciting and something to watch. $4,800 this week, I think it's worth the risk.
Yeah, I think a guy I'm kind of also eyeing with maybe some just being a cheaper play and having some PD upside. He looked good in practice. He's just a fill-in. Nico Hülkenberg, the Hulk. He comes in for Sebastian Vettel. I think he got COVID, so he's forced to miss this race. Well, he's laid down some fast lap times in practice. He is starting 17th, so who knows quite what we're going to get with him and that team. But as like a cheaper play, I think he might be somewhere where I end up. But as far as just overall not necessarily factoring in DraftKings or whatever, I think the guy I have my eye on the most early on, you kind of already mentioned him, is George Russell. If Mercedes can kind of get their stuff figured out, I mean, he kicked Bottas out of that seat essentially, and Bottas did very, very well. I think he's a young guy. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. It'll be really interesting to see what he can do, and I'm excited to see early on how he handles this better ride with being up towards the front, because he was not up towards the front much last year.
Well, I'm excited to see how all this plays out. Is there any more you want to add to what we've discussed already this week?
Well, I think we should at least give our race winner picks. You wanna give out your pick first?
Are we talking F1 here?
F1. Well, I guess we can do NASCAR or F1. I was thinking F1 since we're talking about that.
So let's go ahead and do my F1 pick, Max Verstappen. I think he gets the job done. He's starting right there at the front. Like you said, if he takes that first corner and is able to get that pass clean, I think he takes this thing home. He's really aggressive. He reminds me kind of more of the Intimidator style, a little bit more Dale Earnhardt-esque in the way he races. So I'm really looking forward to what he's able to do this year. He's last year's champion.
Yeah, I think that was basically going to be my pick, but I'll pivot from that, and I'll actually go with a guy that I think could really realistically win this race. And I have no problem pivoting from Verstappen to this guy. Charles Leclerc got the fastest lap in qualifying. He's looked good all weekend long. They look good in testing. His teammate looks fast. I think Ferrari as a whole, I think they're just going to be really good. If he keeps it clean and gets ahead of Verstappen in that first corner, I think that he's just going to click off those laps, because he's certainly talented enough to do it. And if Ferrari's got that power, it's going to be fun to watch. All right, so I guess before we get out of here, I like, obviously, where the direction F1's going, but let's give our shot in the dark for Atlanta NASCAR. Who you got winning in Atlanta?
I'm going with Ryan Blaney. I think he's got an ability starting there at the front. If this race goes more traditional, he could lead a lot of laps and get the job done, because I think he's been really consistent this year. He's a good super speedway racer. Even if it plays into that hand, I like him.
I really, really like that, but obviously I'll pick someone a little bit different, and I'm gonna roll the dice. I'm gonna go Denny Hamlin. I mean, he can do super speedways. Why not? Let's go Denny Hamlin.
It's gonna be fun to watch. We got dual action. We got F1 in the morning, afternoon race, NASCAR. I'm excited to take it all in. Thank you for watching. If you liked what you saw, hit the subscribe button. Let us know what your thoughts are. Do you want us to continue this F1 talk? Drop the comments below. I'm ready to get this action started, Jeremy. For the DK Garage, I'm Joe. He's Jeremy, and we'll see you next time.